a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Amazing Arizonans with Mike Broomhead.
Here we are with another edition of Amazing Arizonans, and this probably should have been the first person I talked to, a former Governor Jan Brewer. I am so excited about this conversation. I want people to be able to get to know you outside of the governor's office, because I met you when you were the Secretary of State.
Right. And
we traveled to a bunch of events together, and I had so much fun. People don't realize how fun you are. You're a lot of fun. You don't think you're fun?
I guess. I don't know. I enjoy life. I do.
Let's talk about that time. It was the 2004 election cycle. You were the Secretary of State. And what I learned about you just in private conversation was you got into the political world in a different way than most. You were just a concerned parent.
Right.
Can you tell that story?
Oh, yes. You know, I think about it often and where it led me. I was a mother. I had 3 kids there in school. I had moved out into the county. There were only 2 grade schools, Park Meadows and Village Meadows. And I went to the school and put my kids in. And then I went to a school board meeting. And I was very disappointed at the school board meeting. I walked out of there with my husband. I took him with me. And I said, who are those people? And what do they do, and how did they get there? He says they're elected, and they run the schools. I said, well, I don't think they're doing a very good job. So I continued. I kept going back. I went back 2 or 3 times, and I wasn't impressed. And so one night he came home from work, and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run for the school board. I mean, we need somebody up there that thinks like me. I think I can do just as well as that they're doing. He said, I said, will you support me? He said, yes. I said, financially. I was smart enough then to realize I needed money to have a little campaign. He said, yes. And I said, financially. And he said, yes, I wouldn't owe anybody any money. He said, yes. And so, but he said, you know, if you really want to make a difference, what you should do, you should run for the legislature. And I said, me? And he said, yes. I said, oh. So we let it go. And about 3 days later, he came in. I was sitting in the den. I got up and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I said, I thought about this. I'm going to run for the legislature. Same drill. Will you support me? I need money. You know, will you help me? Yes, yes, yes. I knew nothing about politics. Absolutely nothing.
And so you were, at the time, a political outsider.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting? Because now when you go to the meetings, and I don't care what party you're in, you're going to the district meetings and you become known and you get elected to a party office and you work your way up and you run. But you ran for the legislature and you were pretty successful from the beginning.
I was. I worked hard. I really, because it was from my heart, I think. I was going for a reason. I wasn't running to hold the office. I wasn't running for the paycheck. Obviously, when I ran, I think it was $6,000. But on the ballot that year, they raised it to $15,000. So I immediately got a raise. So it definitely wasn't for the money. But it was, I worked really hard. I was a grassroots campaigner. My district went all the way from Scottsdale to Sun City, all the way to the Yavapai County line, all the way down to Peoria in some places. And it was 2 legs and a lot of empty space because the growth hadn't started. I lived in the county. My address was Peoria, but I was.
Now, you're not still in the same house you were in then? Really? The same house? Because I know where that house is.
Okay, yeah. I've lived there for almost, since 75.
Wow. When you look at the changes, I want to get back to the office part of it, but when you look at the growth, and you were governor during a big part of that growth,
big time.
You have to have been blown away by what Arizona had become.
Oh, absolutely. I think of it today, and I think about where we were when I first went into the legislature. I wanted to get into the legislature, and I wanted to talk about education. And I was served in the legislature 4 years in the House of Representatives, 10 years in the Senate. Never served on the Education Committee. But I had their budget in appropriations, and boy, did I learn a lot. And I controlled the purse strings, and that's how you control things, is with the money and the divvying up the dollars and trying to assure that they go in the right place.
What made you run for the Secretary of State's office? What drove you in that direction?
Well, like I said, I served 4 years in the House, 10 years in the Senate, ran for the Board of Supervisors, served there for 6 years, and I ran for the Board of Supervisors Supervisors because Maricopa County was in bankruptcy. They were ready to go bankrupt, and so I had to run against my incumbent, my good friend, Mr. King, and I won. And then I thought, well, after 6 years, I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to be a Secretary of the State. I was very impressed with Rose Mofford. She was a great secretary. And I thought it would be so nice not to have to put up with policy and planning and zoning and raising taxes and divvying up the dollars, just to be the goodwill ambassador for the state of Arizona. So I left the Board of Supervisors and ran for Secretary of State. And little did I realize the path I was headed on, and I got elected overwhelmingly. And I served there for 6 years, and then Janet goes with President Obama, and there I am, governor of the state of Arizona. What a privilege.
And before we get to that governor part, I want to ask you, and I don't want to get too much into politics and stuff, but I really want your opinion. You were the Secretary of State in Arizona for such a long time and so well respected in that office. To see what's happened in the last couple of election cycles with election integrity and the challenges to things, can you give us some insight? Do you want to talk about your feelings on how all that goes? I mean, I'm serious, because you did that job for such a long time. To hear the accusations that you heard coming from our party, I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, I know that as being the chief election officer, which I was when I was Secretary of State, and I had to implement a lot of different things because we were doing everything on the internet and the procedures manual and the certification of the equipment. And I'd worked at the county, so I'd understood elections from that side of the field also. So I was knowledgeable. And so when everything fell apart this time, these accusations were made, I was very, very skeptical. And I just don't believe it. I know that there's checks and balances. I know that the things are verified. There's, there's always hiccup.
Yeah, sure.
But nothing major that ever changes the election, as we have seen, and it was just blown out of total proportion. And unfortunately, a lot of people bought into it 100% and were, the election was stolen. The election was stolen. No, the election wasn't stolen.
You have been, for as long as I've known you, Secretary of State, Governor of Arizona. You have been immensely popular within the Republican Party. But there has been pushback because of you saying the election wasn't stolen. Is that new for you, to have pushback within your own party, where you have remained you were a star in this party? Is that new for you?
Well, yeah, a little bit, but, when I was governor, I had a lot of pushback, too. So, it was like, okay, they're entitled to their opinion. I tried to explain to them. I'd ask them for proof. They would, they would approach me at different places, people in the party, and then just normal people that aren't even involved in politics would approach me and say, well, the election was stolen. I don't believe that. I just can't. I know that. Give me some proof. Nobody can give you any proof. They just talk.
So let's talk about the phone call. So Arizona had been a red state for a very long time, almost a supermajority in the legislature. And then we get Janet Napolitano elected as governor, and then she gets reelected as governor of Arizona. And you had to work pretty closely with her. And then you get the phone call that she's taking a job in the Obama administration, which means you're now the governor of Arizona. What was that time? What was that like for you to be notified of that?
Well, it was a strange notification, by the way, Mike. I was sitting at the Capitol in the governor's office because Janet would not resign until she was sworn in as Director of Homeland Security. So I was watching the proceedings on television, and they swore her in, and then they called and said that her assistant was bringing down the resignation, and then I would be sworn in as governor. It was weird. It was just weird because there for a few seconds or minutes, at least 15 minutes, we didn't have a governor. She had resigned, and I hadn't been sworn in, and it was surreal. It was just odd. It just there I was. I'd been in government so much. I wasn't in awe. And I knew that I had a rough row to hoe because we were headed into very serious bad times. Because sitting as Secretary of State, I was watching the legislature all the time. I knew what they had done. A Democrat governor and a Republican legislature, and man, we were out of wits.
When you took that office, though, we were headed down a financial road, and here's the analogy I've used. Tell me if it's fair. I have given a lot of credit to the previous governor and the Ducey administration for rebuilding our economy and diversifying it. But I said you and that administration, along with that legislature, you were like the emergency room physicians, that you had to save the life of the patient. How close was Arizona to financial ruin?
It was the worst it could ever be. We had a $9 billion budget and we had a $3 billion deficit. And most of those dollars were going to education, too. I mean, that's where the majority of the budget goes. And what was I going to do? You know, nobody was going to raise taxes. It was bad times. We were in a deep, dark hole. And I had to work with conservative Republicans of my party, and I had to do some things that they didn't appreciate. However, they came around after they left the legislature and I left the governor's office. But it was ugly. It was. I will tell you honestly. I sat on my patio in the middle of the night and in the winter, looking at the stars, saying, "Dear Jesus, hold my hand and don't let go. You got me here. Just let me do the right thing." And I knew I had a tough enough backbone to do the right thing. My mother told me when I was really little, doing the right thing almost always means doing the hard thing. So, boy, she was right on that call. But we had to make some difficult calls. I had to cut things that I never thought in my lifetime I would ever cut.
I remember my first...
raise.
Yeah, well, that's the other part of it. I remember the first time I ever had pushback. You know, you do conservative talk radio, and so you're kind of preaching to the choir every day. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to someone in your office, and I don't remember who it was, and you had to make a really difficult decision about Medicaid expansion during the time of Obamacare. And there were three choices that you had, and they laid them out for me, and they told me the one you were choosing. And I remember saying, that sounds like the least bad of the three bad choices. And I said, I'm in full support. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The day that we went out and you did the announcement on the Senate lawn,
yeah,
I was the MC, and I'm looking across the sidewalk at protesters, and they're all my friends, and they're booing me, and they're booing you.
Calling me a rhino.
Oh, it was crazy. What was that like for you?
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, because there they are sitting in the legislature. They knew what situation we were in. And what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to let those federal dollars... those federal dollars that would come to our state to take care of our people go to California or Florida or New York and give them the money? Heck no. Heck no. I mean, it wasn't like we were taking money from them, but nope, they weren't having any because they didn't like Medicaid because it was...
Right. But if you had a choice that was better, I'm sure you wouldn't have picked that one.
Oh, heck no.
But that was the choice.
And all the letters that you're getting that people were, not getting their treatment because they'd been kicked off of Medicaid, and it was Medicaid expansion. I mean, we didn't really grow it. We just retook the federal dollars and made a difference. And I will tell you, I was down in Sierra Vista. I was down there on a Trump thing. We were going to the border. We checked into a hotel at 11 o'clock at night. And about 11, I got into the hotel about 11:30 at night, and the guy that was checking us in checked me in, and he says, "I want you to know before you go to your room that I stayed and was on duty tonight because I wanted to thank you for the expansion that you did with Medicare." He said, "You saved my life." He said, "I was going to die." I said, "Oh my goodness," and he hugged me. He was so grateful. He was 23 years old, lived in Sierra Vista. The next morning I wake up, he had written me, and I still have the letter, 2-page letter, thanking me and how it had affected his family, his brothers, and his mother.
Wow.
And it just, you think, okay, that was the right thing to do. But, those kind of stories you just can't ignore. And you sit up in the governor's office and you get all this mail and people calling you and you're hearing all this terrible stuff. I mean, we are human. We're fiscally conservative, but we're human. We've got to take care of people. And why give them money that we can get and give it away to other people? I don't regret it. It was the right thing to do.
But the part of it for me is I don't mind being called wrong by people that I normally agree with. I'm sure if you and I talk long enough, we disagree on some things. But it's when they call your character into question. And I remember watching, because I really had such an affection for you with our time spent on the campaign. And
yes.
You were Secretary of State, and we were at all these little podunk events all over the place. And we would laugh. And, and we would laugh and talk. And now all of a sudden you're the governor. And not only are you the governor, you're immensely popular here in the state of Arizona. And I'm going to tell a story in a moment about that popularity. But then to see people turn on you, not disagree.
Friends.
Yeah, but then accuse you of being something you weren't. That character assassination, that surprised me. I didn't see that coming in people.
It was ugly.
It was.
It was very, very ugly.
So let's shift to the other side of that coin. Let's talk about the tarmac incident with President Obama, the finger in the face. Now, what's the real story there? What was happening? Because the picture captured just a moment in time of what it looked like is you were scolding the president. Is that what you were doing?
I talk with my hands. I got my hands tied
I
down.
do the same thing.
Learned,
I do it when I'm on the radio and nobody can see me. So,
right. Well, I was going out to meet him at Williams Air Force Base. No staff was going with me because I wasn't going to go to Intel because he's flying into town and going to take all the credit for Intel. But I was going to go meet him. But I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to meet him as the governor, and he was the president of the United States. With all due respect, I wanted to greet him. And so I sat down at my desk before I left, and I wrote a letter about certain things that we had done in Arizona that he could possibly implement on the federal level and make life a lot better. One of those things was including the border. And so I took it and I posted it. I picked it up and put it in an envelope, and I'm walking out, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to make a photocopy of my letter. That just come. And so I went back, and they're yelling at me, you're going to be late, you're going to be late. Okay. So I make the photocopy, I shove it in my purse, we go out there, we're waiting, he gets off the plane, we chat, I welcome him to Arizona, and then I said to the President of the United States, I says, I have a letter here in my purse. I said, I would like to give it to you. Can I? And he says, what's in it? And I said, there are things in there that I think that we have done well in Arizona that you could implement or at least look at on the federal level, and I want to share it with you. And he said, okay. And so I was really happy. So I gave it to him, and then he turns around to me, and he says, by the way, he said, I didn't like the way you depicted me in your book. And I said, well, Mr. President, my book is a truth-telling book. I need my border secured, and it's the federal government's responsibility. Well, we got into it, and that's when the finger wag came out, and I wanted him to listen to me and do right by the state of Arizona, because that had been the big contentious thing between him and I. Was always the skunk at the White House, at the parties, and so I always went, but I was the skunk at the White House. But he wasn't listening to me, and it was so important, because when you had the information as governor regarding what was going on at the border, it was overwhelming. It was horrible, from the FBI, the Border Patrol, the police, everything. It's horrible.
Well, that incident happened, and then it instantly was everywhere. All over the internet, that picture of you wagging your finger in the president's face. And then...
Let me say, I got back in my car, my phone's ringing, I answered it because it was my son Michael, and he says, what have you done? Yes. He says, you are all over the news. I said, I don't know. I said, why? He said, something to do with President Obama. I said, well, he wasn't very nice to me. And he said, I don't know. And I said, I don't know. And we hung up. 2 seconds later, he calls me back, and he says, you're wagging your finger at him.
Well, we got wind of it, and we were able to get to you on the phone. And I think I was the first one to talk to you about it. Because then it went on to the Drudge Report, and they were quoting our story. Oh. We had 500,000 hits that day on our website from that story. And then all of a sudden, Scorpions for Breakfast becomes a best-selling book. And all of a sudden, you become kind of the national face of the Republican Party.
Worldwide. It was amazing. It was worldwide.
Starting from where we began, sitting in your house thinking about running for the school board, now you're the governor, and you're also now the face of kind of the opposition to the presidency. Right. What was that like for you?
It was... It's hard to explain. You know that it's happening, but it's somewhat amazing because you realize that everybody knows who you are. Everybody recognizes you. Everybody has a different opinion, by the way, of you. And a lot of people embellish different stories and things, which is kind of interesting, which I never thought people would be doing. But, they made up things that just didn't plain happen, or wrote stories that just plain didn't happen either.
Well, here's a story. Here's a story about how humble you are. We're in Tampa at the convention where Mitt Romney is getting nominated.
2012, right?
2012. And I'm a guest of the party. I've got a seat on the floor. And during the day when all the goings-on are happening, I'm talking to your security detail.
Yes.
And I said, how's it going? And he was so exasperated, this guy. He said, speaking of you, she has no idea how famous she is. He says she just gets up without us and walks away. And so we look up, and you're walking out by yourself of the arena. Right. So they scramble, and I follow, and you just wanted to eat. Do you remember this?
I think
you were eating.
I was trying to get something to eat because we hadn't eaten all day.
Right. So you're sitting against a wall at this little bench eating, and you've got 3 security guys and 1,000 people trying to get you to sign stuff. What was that like?
I don't know if I've even realized it, but I did not know how many people were always following me and surrounding me, and what a job it was for my detailing, and then they had to put security at my house 24/7.
I remember
that. For 2 years. For 2 years. And my poor neighbors, it was horrendous for them too because it was just like a zoo out there. But it was. I don't think I did realize the enormous effect that was happening.
It was so I remember being there when they start things off and they roll call the states, and they introduce Arizona and they introduce you, and that entire room. Every state in the nation, they all stood on their feet and they applauded for you for about, am I wrong, about 3 minutes?
It was long.
You had tears in your eyes. What was, I want to know what that's like for you because...
When it started, it was for Arizona because we were fighting for our country and for the government to take care of it.
When they said your name... They jumped up like Elvis was in the building.
I looked at it afterwards. It was amazing, and I realized during when it was happening, I did know that it was for me and all the people that came over, and the detail was trying to get them shooed away, and it was pretty fantastic.
But at a time where you are, and no one would ever accuse you of being a shrinking violet. You're not at all. You stand by your opinions and you're always willing. But you also were a diplomat and you worked with the other side of the aisle and you worked with people. Where are we now with the political division? Are we beyond getting back to that kind of stand your ground on what you believe, but at the same time you don't have to be unkind to other people? Are we past that?
I hope not, but we are so divided, and you can't even go to your district meeting and get along. You got district committee men that are censoring their elected officials, the presidents of the body, the Speaker of the House in my district was censored by my district. Great guy, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's just so hateful. If you don't agree 100% all the time with everybody, you're not part of the party. You're a rhino. That's wrong, and it doesn't build for community. It used to be in the old days, and you'll remember, we all wanted to go to our county and state meetings and our district meetings because that's where the elected officials were.
Right. And
we would meet people that didn't always agree with us, and that was our opportunity to bend their ear and try to convince them, right?
Yes.
Of our point of view. If you never could get in to see us or see them or whatever. That doesn't matter anymore. You're a rhino if you don't agree 100%.
One of the funniest moments for me, and I realized what a big mistake I had made, was at one of the state meetings, and it was at Grand Canyon University. Uh-huh. You were there as a speaker, and you were wandering around, and I was on the stage, and you had left. You had a very nice purse, and I think it was maybe Louis Vuitton. You had a very nice purse.
Okay.
And you just left it sitting on a chair on the stage.
Oh.
So I said to one of your people, I'll grab your purse, but I didn't know where you went.
Oh.
So here I am. There's
Running around
pictures
with
and
my
video
purse.
me carrying a Louis Vuitton purse back and forth on the stage, and I thought, oh, this is good. I know this is going to end up somewhere.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love it.
But that was the other
I
part
love
of
a
it.
picture of that.
Oh, I wish I never saw
My
one.
bag man.
They had to be there. But even then, the contention that was beginning at some of those meetings, because some of the changes had come into place, you had made some of the decisions, and there were those people in the crowd that you're right. If you weren't going to vote for the slate or you weren't going to do those things, you were seeing the beginnings of that. But you handled it differently because you stood up there and stood your ground with people.
Tried to explain
Right.
why we were doing it. They deserve an explanation, but they wouldn't listen, and they would just be, and sometimes they were just so awful. They were, and today they're worse.
What do you think drives that? Is it the people?
I don't think they have the information. Evidently, they're not listening, and they believe in everything that somebody else tells them. You can't believe everything you hear, right?
But even if you believe in something, you know that you don't always get your way. There has got to be some kind of compromise in people. And there just seems like on both sides of the aisle within both political parties, there is the lack of willingness to compromise. That's dangerous.
It is very dangerous. Well, and that danger is all around. It's lurking everywhere. We're going to lose our party. We already have the independents now, more registered voters than any other party in the state of Arizona. And what is their philosophy? Who knows? So they'll be driving the truck.
Yeah.
And for those that are not in politics, it's important to have a Republican Party and a Democrat Party because people know basically what your philosophy is. They got some guideposts to follow. But if you don't have that, then what?
Yeah, and what does it say, since you were the Secretary of State, that the number one voter demographic in Arizona is now independent, then it's Republican, but not super far behind, but behind is Democrats, and there's only a one-seat majority in the House, a one-seat majority in the Senate for Republicans, lost the governor's race, lost the Secretary of State's race, all of these major statewide offices, the Attorney General. What does that say about dysfunction or the strength of the Republican Party?
It's very, very, very weak. We haven't had the kind of leadership we have needed in the past. We weren't driven in the right direction. We forgot what our mission was. There's a reason you have a party. It's called organization, and you do the grassroots campaigning, and that was brought up through Republicanism. We could beat the Democrats every day, every night of the day on it, And when I was governor, the highest Republican. The highest Democrat elected official was the minority leader in the House.
Yeah,
that was the highest, and that's because we had a party and we led it. And as the leader of the party, I'm taking a little bit of credit there. As the leader of the party, I went out and worked and tried to bring everybody together to win, and it just slowly has eroded because of nonsense, absolute nonsense, and meanness.
Did you have?
No one is even polite.
Oh yeah, that's true. They've given up on that. But when it came to the interactions with people in the opposition, you were a diplomat. You had friends that were Democrats.
I did.
You had a decent working relationship with Governor Napolitano.
Yeah.
How do you make that happen? How do you have to be opinionated? I think John Kyle and you are similar, not in personality, but in that aspect where both of you were very staunch in your beliefs, but respected on both sides of the aisle. How can you teach that to someone?
I don't know. I've tried. I have tried.
I know.
I have spoken to people about that you need to open up the gateway. You have to have communication. That's your opportunity to change their mind. But then you have to stay in your lane, too. Janet Napolitano and we had a relationship. Did I agree with her? Heck no. But at the time, I wasn't agreeing with the Republicans either over in the legislature. They were spending money like drunken sailors. And I would go down there as Secretary of State and say, what are you guys doing? You're driving us all. At that time, I didn't know what was happening with the Obama administration and Janet. But then but you have to go down and you have to be able to talk not only to the Republicans but the Democrats. And I had to talk to Janet. People were after me all the time trying to do executive orders when she was out of town, even when she was campaigning, or go up there to the 9th floor and take over. You got the will, that's not the word they use, but you got the will to do that. And I said, no, I'm not playing games. She's the governor of the state of Arizona. I'm the Secretary of State. I'm going to do my job. She needs to do her job.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree.
Right. But it's her job.
And I signed the executive orders. I mean, I had to sign my name to all that stuff. Did I like it? No. But I didn't play games.
Right. When you look, do you maintain a relationship with the other former governors that you know? I mean, do you have a good relationship with Ducey? Do you have a good relationship with Fife Symington?
I have a great relationship with Fife, and I had a great relationship, of course, with Jane Hull and Rose Mofford. I loved Rose.
Yeah.
I knew Jane, of course. We served in the legislature together, so we were good friends. And her kids, we knew each other really quite well. But they're all gone.
Yeah,
they're all gone, and it's difficult. I was kind of out of politics when Doug went in. I was not in the same
right
program, so I know that we have done some things together afterwards, but not many.
When you look at that, former presidents, it seems like it doesn't matter what party that they're associated with, there is kind of a respect after you've done the job, that it's a very difficult job. And so there isn't a lot of second guessing of a president because you've done the job, let him do. Is that how you feel about it? Do you kind of think it's a difficult job, let the governors navigate there?
You want everybody, it was like when Katie Hobbs got elected. I wanted her to be successful. I knew she didn't believe the way that I believe, but I wanted her to be successful with the state of Arizona. We want Arizona to be successful. And, and so, she reached out, her team reached out. I talked to her 2 or 3 times, I tried to give her my opinions on things. Did she listen to me? I don't know. Do I like a lot of the things that she's done? No. But, I'm not out there bad-mouthing her.
Right.
She's the governor.
Right, and that's your respect for the position.
Right, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about your personal life as much as you will, because now, like you said, all those years serving in the legislature, then with the Board of Supervisors, Secretary of State, Governor of Arizona, then it's over.
Yep.
What next? I mean, how is life now? What happened when you sat down maybe and caught your breath? Your public life is over. Yeah. You're not in office anymore.
Yeah.
You're not running for office anymore.
I think you're kind of thinking, this is great. I'm going to travel and go on cruises and do this, blah, 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 and get everything together. But you don't, because people are still after you. And so I didn't do anything. I went on a vacation that I did do. But I went right back to work. I went to work for Ballard Spahr, Government Relations, which is a large law firm out of Philadelphia. A lot of Democrats, but they need some Republicans, right? And then I worked for DCI out of Washington, D.C., which is a lobbyist group, a public policy group, and worked for both of them at the same time. So I was busy. I was doing things with Puerto Rico and their deficit, and and I sat on a couple of boards and everything. So, and then after about 6 years, I said no more. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to rest and I want to travel. And then about, I think it was 7 years later, then it was the COVID.
Yeah.
So then we were all cooped up, and then I just kept getting older and older and older, and So you have little health problems and issues and stuff, and so now I'm just enjoying life. I'm very involved with Hope in the Future, which is a nonprofit organization that my son has, and he takes care of Arizona's kids. I always call them. They're the foster kids that have been physically and sexually abused, and he's made a huge difference, and so I'm very dedicated to that, and on a couple of other little.
Isn't that where you do the walk every year?
Yeah.
Because I emceed that for you.
Yes, you did, yes.
And what was remarkable about that was watching, because it was almost like the two superstars coming together, because you walked with Sarah Palin that year.
Yes, Sarah Palin. Oh, yes.
So I was there behind all of you, with her ex-husband now, but her husband, Todd.
Oh, yeah, Todd. He's a great guy.
Who was the most laid-back individual who would rather be hunting than in that crowd.
Or snowmobiling.
And I remember asking him while we were walking, what do you think of all this? He goes, man, he just didn't want anything to do it. But you two seemed to thrive in that environment where you knew you were doing good for so many people, and it wasn't really about you and her.
And she was a lot of fun.
She was fun.
She was a lot of fun. I went up to Alaska and to her house and up to the cabin and stuff. We went snow machining with Todd. And boy, does he go! He could go.
Yep.
We went for the Iditarod.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and did that with Todd.
Well, and then they bought a place here.
Yes.
And her daughter had a place out in Maricopa.
Right. See?
So they loved Arizona. What a difference in geography from Alaska to here.
I know.
So when you look at those things,
I think, what a life.
Yeah.
What a life. This little kid that was born in Hollywood, California. And
well, when I talked to you about that, is that you went from being, just being concerned, but even when you and I would be at these events, none of this ever seemed to me like it was too big for you. You seemed to be acclimated to it. You know what I mean?
I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked it. And I had a supportive family.
So what's next? Because you still get asked. Look, I asked you to come here. You're getting pulled in 85 different directions. Every time an election comes up, people want your advice. Do you appreciate that? Do you still like that?
It's like I have an opinion. I have not lost my opinion, and I'll let everybody know what it is. And
which is why I love having you on.
A good and bad opinions sometimes, and sometimes they don't like that. But I tell them the truth. I'm a truth teller, and I like that. I do. But I pick and choose. I kind of try to pick and choose what I'm going to do. I was honored that you would invite me to your show. And answered immediately.
You did?
Yeah. And I thought, well, this will be a fun thing. And I didn't know exactly what we were doing, but I thought it was with you, and you're such a great guy. And I've known you for so long, I knew you wouldn't be too mean, because we are very cautious of the press.
Do you remember one last story? Do you remember the story of when I was very rude to you on the phone? Do you remember this? I was in the newsroom getting ready to do my show when I was doing afternoons.
Oh.
And I get a phone call from a number that I don't recognize. And the person on the other end of the phone said, Michael? And I said, yeah. Who is this? And you said, well, who is this? And I said, you got to know, what do you mean, who is this? You called me. And I was rude. I remember saying to you, lady, if you don't know who you called, I'm not telling you who I am.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it clicked and I recognized your voice. And there were people standing.
You were really rough.
I was.
Yes,
there were people in the newsroom standing around me trying to figure this out. And then I went, Governor? And you laughed. And I said, it's Mike Broomhead. You called me instead of your son. Do you remember that?
Right, I do.
I felt so bad. I was so rude to you, and you didn't bat an eye. You were just like, listen, I just want to know who I'm talking to.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I do, because I was
so
calling
horrible.
my son Mike.
I hung up the phone.
But it didn't sound like him.
Right.
And so I went, Mike?
Yeah. I hung up the phone.
Who is this? I thought you'd answered his phone.
I hung up the phone, and everybody in the newsroom laughed, and I thought, well, that's the last time she's ever coming on my show.
Oh,
that was hilarious.
Life is fun. Life is fun. It's those good stories.
Is there anything left for you to do? I mean, you say you want to enjoy life, but are there things still that you want to accomplish, or do you think that...
I want to go to Greece.
Do you?
Yes.
Well, I think that's terrific, traveling, and you haven't been.
No, but I want to go. I want to go to Rome, and then I want to take the cruise, and I want to end up in Haifa. In Israel. And that's something I've always wanted to do. I've been all over the world, but I've never been to Greece. And so I keep telling everybody I want to go. And I said, you keep telling me later. Later, it's not going to last much longer for me.
Now that COVID's over, why don't you go?
I know, because everybody's always got something else going on.
I'll go with you.
All right, let's go to Greece.
You and I will go to Greece.
Get you one of those little hats, and
we can do that.
Lots of olive oil.
Sure.
And healthy.
We're going to start rumors.
Yes.
Let's start rumors.
Boy, that'd be good for my reputation.
Mine too.
I don't know about that, but for mine, it would be real good.
Listen, I can't thank you enough. You have been such a good friend. When I was just wading into my first days in this political arena after my brother was killed, and I just wanted to help.
Yes.
You and I did so many events together, but then when you became governor, you still treated me the same as you did. You were always so kind with your time, like you are now.
Guy.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, you're a great guy, and your family is great.
Yeah.
So
I've got a great bunch.
You do, and your mom is super. I remember her. She's a spirit.
Yeah, she just turned 80.
Yeah.
So she's still kicking, and she was just out here, and after the hurricane hit our hometown.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that was went right over our hometown.
I heard you on the radio on that, and you had people calling you from school, from when you were in class. Yes, that was amazing.
And my mom came out until the power went back on. She stayed with me for a while. She stayed with me for about a month. And so we had a good time. It was nice to see her. But I think she was ready to go home as I was ready for her to go when it was time to go. But we had a great visit. So thanks for doing this again. And I hope you'll come on the radio show.
Will do.
I know you like to go on with Gatos and Chad quite a bit, but I'd love to steal you away once in a while.
Yes, I would love that that too.
As we get closer to 24, I'd love to get your opinions on what's happening. I'd love it.
Okay, let's do it.